Hi everyone, I'm Joe. Today it's time for me to do my autumn 2022 book haul. I haven't done a book haul since the start of the year, if I remember correctly, so this should be an interesting video, especially as the collection of books in this, of which there are 10 by 9 different authors in 3 genres, is a fairly varied one. So I'm really quite interested in talking about these and indeed reading them, because they really are quite exciting books and the fairly recent purchases as well. These are not, sometimes when I do book hauls, they may be going back 3 or 4 months. These really aren't. These are going back only, frankly, a month. So these are very, very recent. I've been quite good at buying books all year until recently, and now I'm buying quite a lot. Anyway, the first 2 books that I am going to be speaking about in this video are part of an ongoing series, and that is Books 9 and 10 in the Flavia series, written by Alan Bradley. These are The Grave is a Fine and Private Place, which is the 9th book, and the 10th book is The Golden Tresses of the Dead. Flavia is a young girl in the first book. She is keen on chemistry, and unsurprisingly that ends up leading her into getting involved in solving basically a murder per book. Pretty much that's the overall premise in a nutshell. She lives in this big old house in the side of this little village, in English countryside. It's an old, well-established English family with a few connections here or there, and let's just say she keeps getting into situations, pulls through barely, and I've heard apparently only recently that there will be a 11th book coming out fairly soon, and that 11th book may well be the final book in this series, which I'm actually quite happy about, because the character of Flavia is now getting older. She's now well into her mid-teens, and frankly I feel as though an adult Flavia will be a different feel to the whole world, and I think you could write about her without fail, but frankly finish this series and then sort of create a new sort of offshoot series, I think would be best, if you're going to write about a more adult Flavia, which I don't think would necessarily work well, because it's the premise that works, I think, for this. So creating an older character would maybe be too similar to other premises, maybe a bit more generic, but it's hard to say. I love this series and I'm very happy to get around to those books. The third book I'm going to speak about is Fugitive Telemetry, written by Martha Wells. This is the second Murderbot novella. Starts off with 4 novellas, then there is the first novel, and then there is this one second, and there will be a third. I have the first novel on order, and it's taking a long time to get delivered to me. Sadly I wanted to include it today, but I haven't got it. Somewhere on a van somewhere, hopefully. So sadly I can't talk about that book, and indeed I can't read this book until I get that book. So I'm a bit impatient, frankly, because I'm really into Murderbot at this exact second, because I've only just read the 4 Murderbot novellas. The idea of Murderbot is simply, it is an android that was designed by humans to kill other humans and defend them against other humans. Murderbot, however, who is obviously partially biological as well, isn't actually keen on killing humans. It prefers to watch television shows, read books, and listens to music. Yeah, that's my idea of a good time as well. So it basically gets into adventures, let's say. I don't want to talk about the plot overall, but the premise is that, and it's very sarcastic with Murderbot, because Murderbot doesn't really care too much about humans, although it sort of starts to a little bit throughout the book. It starts to actually realise there's more to humans than just, merely the person who gives it some stupid order, and takes up its time whilst it's trying to actually watch its next episode of its ongoing shows. But it's funny, but personal, and actually deeply introspective, and really does look at what it means to be human in a really interesting way. The 5th book that I'm going to speak about, this is the 50th, is The Grief of Stone, written by Katherine Addison. This is the second book in the I forgot the name of the actual series. Does it have on the back of the book? No, it doesn't. This is a sequel to The Witness for the Dead, set in the same world as the Goblin Emperor. It follows the character of Salahar. This is a fantasy novel with phenomenal world building, very interesting characters, unusual characters. In the first book is obviously about a goblin character, or half goblin character, who becomes the Emperor, and that creates obviously problems for everybody because nobody expected them to be the Emperor. Then this follows a character that makes a little appearance in that book called Salahar, who is, as the second book may suggest, Witness for the Dead. They basically go around sort of register deaths for the Emperor, normally suspicious deaths, so they're kind of like an investigator of sorts, a personal sort of like a kind of a high commissioner investigator for, you know, the crown. And Salahar is an interesting character which I did not describe very well. As a result, this book is better than I just described because it's hard to describe it without giving away spoilers. That's the case with this book. So it's a brilliant book that I didn't do justice to, frankly, with describing. The sixth book that I'm going to speak about is the first and only masterwork I'm going to speak about today, and that is Kairos, or Chaos, by Gwyneth Jones. I bought this with knowing very little, almost basically nothing about the plot particularly, other than the fact that I haven't read anything by Gwyneth Jones before. This is not part of one of her existing worlds. I think she has several other books recently introduced to the masterworks, but I believe they are part of several existing worlds for Jones, and I didn't want to start with her with a big existing world, or at least risk that. So I thought this is apparently completely unrelated to anything else, so I thought this might be a interesting one to start with. I'll read the back. London, early 21st century. A Conservative government is in power in the UK. That's familiar. Bringing increased wealth disparity, an ever more militant police state, and rising civil discontent as the wealthy govern for themselves rather than the people. Yeah, what's different? This sounds like it's actual reality at the moment. But Breakthrough, a pharmaceutical company turned religious cult, have the answer. They call it Chaos. Chaos allows the user not just see a different world, but shape the world to their very will. Perfect for a cult of like-minded individuals, disastrous when it is exposed to the general public. As disparate groups try to shape the earth into their own image, reality itself is placed under threat. With society so divided, is there any way to pull the world back together? Now I've read that, I do remember why I bought this and why it sounded particularly interesting. This is obviously, I mean, the plot of it sounds, at least politically, very much like the UK now. Yeah, our government is out for themselves and they're out for their own financial gain, blatantly, as everybody can see at the moment, and they're corrupt and incompetent for the most part, with little intelligence being shown. And this is obviously adding the extra element of, what about if there is an apparently a sort of a miracle drug that made people see the world in this, you know, like a kind of a happy place, a happy world. So this should be an interesting experience. I don't know what Gwyneth Jones' writing is like, but this should be a very interesting book to experience, and one that I am very much excited to get to. The seventh book that I'm going to speak about today is the shortest and smallest of the books, and that is Utopias of the Third Kind, written by Vandana Singh. This is one of the PSPM Press Outspoken Authors collection, of which a friend of mine, Rachel known as Canon and BookTube, is a big fan of, and indeed she only recently read this and talked about it so enthusiastically, in fact, that I actually thought, well, I've read one short story collection by Singh this year, and which was the first, and I really enjoyed that, and I thought it was really impressive. So I thought, yeah, let's just not debate it too much, let's just buy something else by her and see what else she can manage. This is both fiction, and there is a essay in it as well. It's only a very short little book, and it should be an interesting author. These are very much focused on sort of select pieces by the author that really try to explore the range and depth that each of the authors that are in this collection, which are fairly extensive by this point, are capable of, and they are really interesting sounding. I haven't really got around to them yet, I mean, I listened to Rachel talking about them, but personally, I haven't really got around to them until now. So, you know, I will probably read a few more of these in, you know, the upcoming years. And the what is that? The 7th book that I'm going to speak about is To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This is a book that I brought purely because of the author Becky Chambers. At this point, is an easy choice for me. I've enjoyed everything I've read by Becky Chambers. Obviously, she's known for the Wayfinder series, which is very popular on BookTube some years ago now, and indeed I read them, and I may have reviewed one of the books. I can't even remember at this point what I've reviewed because I've done a rather lot of reviews. But this is one that is a short, this may even be cast as a novella. I think it is a novella in fact, length. I'm always bad on length of books because I know there's a fine line and I'm not sure of it. So I think this is a novella. It's one that sounds very interesting. This is one that several people that I trust on BookTube has talked about enthusiastically. Obviously it's set in the future, and it's basically the idea of, instead of terraforming planets when we go to a new world and changing the planet, we change ourselves, we biologically alter ourselves. So if a planet's got a different air mixture, for instance, you know, doesn't have the right level of oxygen, we'll change our lungs, our breathing system, will on a fundamental level, so we don't need oxygen to that level. Or if it was, you know, a heavier planet, a much heavier gravity, we would change our bone density, or increase our bone density, or lighten bone density, or increase body mass, that sort of thing, or height, whatever we need. It's the idea of changing humanity to fit the environment rather than changing the environment to fit humanity. And that was a particularly interesting one, which I'm very interested to get to. The 8th book that I'm going to talk about today is The Spare Man, written by Mary Robinette Kowal. I have read several other books by Kowal, namely books in the Lady Astronaut series, of which I loved and were very popular again on BookTube a few years ago, and still are very popular in fact. This is a brand new book by Kowal. This was only just released 2 weeks ago, so this is actually for me a remarkably new release and one that I'm very eager to get to. This is obviously science fiction, but it's also a sort of a mystery book as well. It is set on a space station. The main character is called Tesla Crane, and actually at the WarCon in Chicago only a few months ago, I actually was in a reading with Mary Robinette Kowal, and she's actually reading several chapters from this book. So, and it sounded quite interesting, and obviously I know, again, the same friend that I mentioned before, Rachel, she is a big fan of Kowal, I mean for obvious reasons, because she's a really good writer, and I'm very eager to get to this. Obviously, this is one that is not related to the Lady Astronaut books, but obviously it has a female lead with a male supporting character again, which is becoming a kind of a more like a go-to staple of Kowal now, which I'm all for, because you know so many books are written with male leads. It's nice to actually have something written differently, especially as obviously like, you know, the psychology of, you know, male female is different, and often it's a more thoughtful experience when it's a female lead, frankly. So I'm all for this, and it's one that I'm very interested to get to. It's basically a newly married couple, I believe. A crime happens on a space station, I believe, and they get involved, and they have a dog with them. That's really all I know, and I don't actually want to know more. I want to go into that one fairly blind. And indeed, the next two books I also don't know too much about, so I can't say too much about them because I'm trying to go into them unknown, so, you know, with an open mind. And the 9th and penultimate book is, oh yes, Station Eternity, written by Lafferty. This is the second book that I will have read by Lafferty. The first of them being 6 Weeks, I just remember the name of it, which I greatly enjoyed. That was obviously a interesting sort of, almost like a murder mystery, but a closed murder mystery, which I thought was phenomenally well written and a remarkable concept. This is one that I know. It's basically it's an amateur detective called Mallory Viridian who has a talent for solving crimes. Crimes are committed and they solve them. I don't know anything more than that. That sounds like a terrible description. I'm aware. I don't want to know more than that. I'm trying to go into a few of these, especially this is a fairly new release. I want to go into these relatively blind. So I'm trying to not know for myself, which makes talking about them in a book haul rather difficult. But Lafferty has a unique way of writing and a very interesting way of looking at characters and character design in relation to the environment that they are inhabiting at that moment. I mean, this one is obviously related to, unsurprisingly, this time a space station, something happening on a space station. The main character has to get involved and try to obviously not get killed and solve it, which is fairly common for any of these books. A character gets involved in big events, they have to sort of get through them and pull through and sort of triumph, or not always, or at least try to triumph. Sometimes they may fail. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes, and I'm very interested in that book. And it is better, I'm almost certain, by the way, it is better than my rather strange description. And the last book I'm going to talk about is one that I really can't speak about because it's a short story collection. So, how do you speak about a short story collection that you haven't read? You don't. Especially not when it is Synopticon, which is a anthology of science fiction short stories by Chinese authors. Now, quite a few of the authors in this I do not know. I know a few of them, but not many. So I don't really know what to say about this other than it sounds very interesting. In more recent years I've got into heavily translated science fiction in particular. Not necessarily always Chinese. Obviously there's a fair bit of Chinese, but there's also a certain amount of Japanese. I've got translated fiction as well as for instance Polish and several other languages that I've got quite into, it seems like. I think you really quite enjoy other language viewpoints, because of course when it gets translated you've got the interesting viewpoint of the translator translating the actual word, plus of course just the authors themselves. They're writing from a different part of the world, different country, a different culture. Their view, obviously I'm living in the UK. I'm very much a Western perspective. These are not Western perspective authors. So seeing a different viewpoint, seeing a different way of considering, what works in the world, what is allowed, on a cultural level, on a societal level, what are these sort of little faux pas that people do, what are things that are allowed, and obviously that would be the exact opposite in, for instance, the UK. Is interesting, and it's a collection that I'm quite eager to get to. And for the record, I think the cover is really, really nice. I mean, this has been advertised and really hyped up quite heavily. I've noticed recently as well, so I'm not surprised the cover's really impressive because they're really advertising this, really boosting it up quite high. I expect and hopefully, I'm hoping that it's for a good reason. It's not just hyping it up just because they can, just because I want it. So hopefully it actually is as good as they are hyping it out to be, which I will find out in the near future. And with that said, that is actually it for all of these books. So if you have read any of these, and I can pick them up without dropping on the floor, which I've managed, then please leave a comment. If you would like to read any of them, then again leave a comment and we can have a talk about it. Or if you have any suggestions based on books you think I might enjoy based on any of these, or just talk about books as well that you've recently got and you've read and you've enjoyed, then again leave a comment and we'll just talk about it. And with that said, that is actually it for this video. So I will leave a link to all of these books in the description box below, as I always do, as well as all my social media links will be there. And with that said, that is it for this video, and there will definitely be more book hauls in the near future. I've been very good, as I said at the start of the video, with buying books recently, well, this year, mainly because I had a lot of books to read. However, I am now at a point though with my books behind me that, and this may sound ridiculous if you know my channel for a while, because you know a book I read, I'm actually running out of books to read, which sounds silly actually, but I truly am. I mean, I may have an incredibly large quantity of books, but I've actually read pretty much 99% of my entire book collection. There are, I think, or more actually, 99% is 99 point something. Yeah, I've only got a few dozen books left unread at the moment, and those are often in series. And actually lately I've been trying to find something to read, and I'm like, yeah, I've read everything. I mean, rereading is perfectly good, but when you're trying to make videos about books, I don't want to be rereading continuously, because then I don't have anything to talk about. So it's, yes, I'm going to be very carefully doing some quite varied book hauls in the upcoming future, which hopefully should be interesting to people. Definitely will be interesting to me, because I'm going to be the one reading them. Anyway, with that said, that is definitely it for this video. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.